as my obsession grew, I was saving body parts such as skulls and skeletons.
So I don't really have an intro for this video, as I feel like we need to take things seriously for a second. The new Netflix dramatization about famed serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer is nonetheless controversial. I mean, this shouldn't come as a surprise either. True crime is arguably one of the most consumed forms of content and media out there. There are countless amounts of podcasts, YouTube channels, movies, documentaries, shows, you name it, all catered to this genre. And while it is a morbid topic to consume, it can be fascinating to some.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
The human mind is one of the most amazing things to study, and trying to understand why a psychopath or serial killer's thoughts are the way that they are can be interesting. So I like to believe most people watch these just to get some kind of clarification, if there is any, or simply just alert themselves to the reality of what truly evil people are capable of, and maybe pick up on the signs themselves in case ever confronted with an unfortunate situation. So while I understand, and I'm even a connoisseur of this type of media myself, I think we often consume this content without thinking of how what we're watching or listening to may affect those who were directly related to the events. Anytime you make a film or movie about one of the world's most sick and depraved serial murders, you have to take into consideration the victims and the families of the victims. And in this case, the new Dahmer series, its biggest crime is that it allegedly did not do this. Reaching out to the families of the victims who were involved in this, or especially those who would be portrayed on screen, might have been the respectable thing for Netflix to do here. Now, I understand creative freedoms and liberties, and there was a chance the families would have simply condemned the makings of this anyway. It still, however, would have showed an attempt at consideration for these victims. I also think Netflix's second biggest issue was that they marketed this as something related to the LGBTQ community. Forgive me if I'm not saying that right. And this is just simply terrible. In reality, the only thing that should be related to Dahmer and the tragic events associated with this guy is horror and pure evil. Now, I doubt Netflix was purposely trying to harm anyone by making this. However, it does show a flaw in the creative process of true crime media. Simply showing more care and attention to whom this may be potentially harmful to is a step Netflix kind of fumbled here, and there's no mistaking that. And to those claiming that the series glorifies serial killers, I don't agree. But what I do agree with is at this point, when do we stop making content based on this guy? I wouldn't be mad if this was the last time I have to hear or see anything about Jeffrey Dahmer. We got 6 damn movies about this dude, and I think we're good at this point. Now, with that being said, this is easily the best one about the events surrounding Jeffrey Dahmer and his victims. And I think this is a pretty good place to stop. And this is a great place also to segue into Now, while I understand the controversy and even agree with some of the protests, I do at its core believe this is a piece of art in the form of film. Art can be disturbing and unpleasant at times, but creative freedom is a real thing and it should be respected. And with this, I have to admit this is a well-crafted miniseries, maybe even one of the best I've ever seen. So disavowing the show entirely would do a huge disservice to anyone who worked on this project. And to the amazing cinematography, its incredible sound design, and near flawless performances. Everyone turns in a great performance here, and while I was nervous about Niecy Nash being the nosy neighbor from the trailers, I have to say she was one of the best aspects of this show. She was necessarily annoying and strong, and easily one of her best performances to date.
Eat the sandwich, I made it for you.
I'll eat it later.
I want to see you try it. See if you like it.
Get out of my house.
And I can say the same for other actors like Richard Jenkins and Molly Ringwald, who played Dahmer's parents respectively. But above anything else is Evan Peters. He may just be one of the most underrated actors working today. He is asked to embody the personification of a psychopath, and he does just that. His performance is both breathtaking and bone-chilling at the same time. Truly worth your time just to see his performance. I also think the film does a great job showcasing the more unfortunate aspects of Dahmer and his crimes, such as how race and discrimination played important parts in allowing him to carry out these heinous acts. It's alluded to and honestly not hard to see how the police during these times may not have cared too much about gay, black, and minority men disappearing or being harmed. In the late 80s and 90s, it was one thing to be an ethnic minority, another thing to be gay, and something completely different to be all of the above. The show shines a spotlight on how less care and investigative procedures were lended to the disturbances associated with Dahmer. You could even make the argument the police didn't even want to deal with Dahmer himself because he was a gay man. But we see he still had one advantage, and that was simply being a white man. His words seemingly trumped all, even those who were gravely concerned and showed genuine signs of danger. It gets you thinking if Dahmer knew minorities would be easier targets for his sick actions. Lastly, I wanted to point out something that could be considered both a negative and positive of the show. And that's how it portrays what happens to the victims. On one hand, these gruesome acts are simply something the families and friends of the victims have to relive if they choose to watch or even hear about this show. On the other hand, if I had to choose a more hopeful and positive silver lining, that would be that the victims are actually treated as human beings here, and not just plot devices to show how bad or evil Dahmer was. In my opinion, the show does a great job giving them personality and even giving many of them background information, insight to who they really were aside from just being victims. We learn things about them that we probably would have never known. And perhaps no greater and sadder example of this would be from episode 5, when we are introduced to Tony Hughes. He was an amazing young man, from all accounts, who was also a model. And he was also deaf, and all of this is true to life, but also facts about the man that we otherwise would have never known. He felt more like a person than a statistic. In a sense, this allowed his memory to live on, or at least in my opinion it did. Now, with this being said, I do think this could make things all the more heartbreaking when you see these events unfold. But in short, I think the Dahmer Show is one that if you're connected directly to these events or someone who is easily disturbed, obviously watching this probably isn't in your best interests. I agree the series is controversial and any of the criticisms it gets are warranted. I want to reiterate this. Aside from those claiming that it glorifies serial killers, I don't think it does in any way. The film shows Dahmer living a deeply disturbing life, and it shows him being ridiculed and ultimately dying gruesomely as a result of his actions, and the show makes it clear that with his death may have even been an easier way out for him. Regardless how you feel about it, these things happened, and the show accurately, maybe almost too accurately, depicts the events, which by most, not all, but most accounts appear to be factual and accessible online. The show is shot, written, and performed well, and because of this, I give Dahmer an 8.6 out of 10. If it weren't for the controversy and criticism, I would even like to see Evan Peters get nominated for an Emmy. He was wonderful in the role, maybe too damn wonderful if I'm being honest. I can see how and why he may be seeking therapy after taking on this project. Anyways, I want to end by apologizing to anyone who may find this show offensive or disturbing. Your feelings are always validated with me, as this shit is tough to watch, so I can only imagine how those affected or those who are sensitive to this type of stuff may feel. Either way, for those of you who hated it or liked it, let me know in the comments below. Hopefully you guys are all doing great this October. Halloween is almost here. Spooky season is in effect, so be sure to watch your backs out there. Now, if you like what I do here, don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button, because that does help me out a great deal. It helps the channel get noticed so I can continue getting content like this out there for you guys. And lastly, if you're thinking of dressing up as Jeffrey Dahmer or anybody from this mini-series for Halloween, don't.